CIS and Senteon webinar series, a deep dive into the CIS benchmarks. I'm your host, Zach from Senteon. Got my co-host, Rich McGraw from CIS, and Kayla joining us after a long trip, the CISO at Devo. Thanks for joining us, guys. Really looking forward to the show.
Happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So we are at episode 20, Rich. We've been doing this for quite some time. I was trying to count the other day, but I think we've covered nearly half of the CIS benchmarks to cover a Windows system. So
getting into the good stuff today. So yeah, it's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot and been able to meet a lot of great people like Kayla. So it's been very rewarding.
Yeah, I think this actually marks our near halfway point. So I think we'll have in total about 40 episodes just to cover hardening a workstation and server on the Windows side. So
just getting out of steam. We're going.
Yeah, so plenty of hours invested in this. It is a massive topic, and today's going to be a special topic because we will be integrating some of the higher security function settings to the topic. So CIS does break their settings into profiles, L1 meaning level 1, L2, and then they have some next generation and BitLocker settings. These are going to be a mixture of the L1s and L2s. So we brought the champion here, Kayla Williams, to help us. So Kayla, I'll give you a brief introduction, but I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit further. Kayla has a unique background starting on the GRC side and really focusing in on the risk aspects of the cybersecurity space, and really just fell in love with that, if I'm allowed to say that, and ended up moving up at Devo until she was actually CISO. So she really focuses in on the GRC and risk aspects as a CISO. And from the stories I heard in the pre-show, does a little bit of sales on the side when she needs to. But Kayla, I'll let you introduce yourself a little bit more and maybe tell us what Devo is.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi, everybody. I'm Kayla Williams. I am the CISO at Devo Technology. We are a cloud native SIEM and data analytics platform. So our major competitors are like SentinelOne and Splunk. And yes, I see in the chat, we just put SOCanalystday.com. So if you work in a SOC, someone you know or love works in a SOC, or if you manage them, yesterday we actually had our full day for the third year in a row celebrating SOC analysts. So in addition to doing, yeah, it was great. I mean, seriously, if you know someone, next year we're going to do it again. It's every October, like nominate people. Like it's fun. They get prizes and things, and it's great.
That is super exciting. How did that start? I feel like those are the unsung heroes a lot of the time.
That's exactly what it is, right? Like we have this platform, and obviously being a security company, we have our own SOC, and being a manager of it, I see it. The people in our company see it. Like we are constantly stressed out, mental health, burnout. There's a lot, not just in the SOC, but in the security industry as a whole.
Yeah, there's been press about that recently, and I've listened to some podcasts specifically about that in recent times. It's becoming, it's starting to be talked about at least, so that's good.
Yeah, and there's like the Devo SOC performance report as well that you can get from our webpage, which is just devo.com. That really goes into we're surveying people. We're working with Wakefield. We're trying to research. So we're trying to figure out like what are the percentages of people who are just burnt out and like need a reprieve, and why are we losing so many people, right? What can we do to elevate this to management? So that's really where SOC Analyst Day comes in, and the work that I've been doing around, communicating this out to those that need to hear it. Because I think boots on ground don't feel that leaders like myself and above really truly understand what it's like to be in the SOC, and constantly having alerts firing at you can be overwhelming.
That's awesome to hear you guys.
We're in an era now where SOCs are being managed remotely too. So you have someone isolated, just being barraged with, SIM alerts or whatever it is. And it's like, my head's going to explode.
Absolutely. Yep.
And shout out to the CIS SOC individuals. CIS runs a SOC for state and local and tribal territories. We analyze state and local net flow data for all of those organizations. And we run the MSISAC, which is part of what I just described. And then we also do the same for elections and infrastructure as a SOC called the EIISAC. So we have SOC people at CIS. Shout out to them.
Yeah, it's great.
Very cool to hear someone like Devo really giving the appreciation and taking the time for those surveys, right? Because they really may not always feel like they're recognized by the leadership, but without them, how are we going to function as a business? So that's
Exactly.
awesome.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well,
One question. Did you actually go to Devo because you wanted to be the CISO, the Devo CISO?
Actually, I joined
That's such a
Devo
good
as
ring.
I joined as a VP of GRC. So there was no like people were talking about actually making a Devo CISO song because it rhymes.
It's such a good ring. Sorry, we digress.
I'm not creative enough to do it myself. So if you can come up with something, I'd love to hear it.
Someone put it in the comments. AI can probably get that done before we're over.
No, that's perfect. And for the listeners, again, this is very educational, high level conversations, but tell us a little bit about GRC, what that is, and how that actually translated to your current role as CISO.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's interesting because my background, so a lot of the things that I actually presented on it, I moderated a panel on it yesterday about like non-traditional paths and creating diversity
There you go. That's you.
inside security teams. So yeah, I'm absolutely a non-traditional path into security. I graduated with a degree in accounting. My track was CPA, certified public accountant, or chartered accountant if you're abroad. And I got into external auditing, did my 2 years, and realized how much I hated it. I was miserable. And like, no offense to people who do it. That's great for them, and I can sympathize with them, but it was not for me.
You know who likes auditors, Kayla?
Other auditors?
Yeah, nobody. Nobody. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. But I couldn't really figure out how to get into corporate life. And I graduated college back in 2008. Like the economy just wasn't great. So I moved into internal auditing, which is different. Believe it or not, it is different. But I learned like regulatory audits, technical audits, operational audits, things of that nature. And there came a time where I got the opportunity to apply for a role in the security team, and the auditing mind, that process mind that you have really works.
Yeah, that's a good background for that.
Yeah. And then, before I knew it, I was sent over to England for a year, and I got to work directly with the leadership team at that company. It was a great experience. Then I did that enterprise risk and security risk for about another 2 years at that same financial services company, and then moved over to LogMeIn as their director of GRC. So I built the security program there. So that was, now the company's called GoTo, like GoToMeeting. They used to have LastPass and a few other, they had 23 products in their portfolio when I was there. They don't anymore. They divested. But
that's really cool. I actually have a question. So with this internal auditing background, moving in, obviously there's all these regulations, and I'm sure you're intimately familiar with many of them. But could you tell us could you tell us a little bit about the landscape of how CISOs work with auditors, but also how solutions are changing to maybe assist with these auditing process, and how a CISO works with vendor technology?
That's a great question. So I think it's really dependent on the CISO's personality. I am a bit like more sympathetic with auditors because they're moving around from, company to company, trying to learn all new processes and really trying to understand the full picture. Obviously, some customers are easy to work with than others. Some things have different levels of maturity of things being written down, right? So it can be a bit tricky when it comes to doing auditing. But for me, I know they're just trying to do their job, and I look at this
in their shoes. So
yeah,
that's really important.
Also, being a CISO, like part of my job is to build trust amongst our customers in the marketplace and our stakeholders, whether it's the board, if you're a public company, your shareholders, or even your internal employees, right? It's my responsibility. And I need someone to come through and validate, check my homework while I'm checking everybody else's, that whole.
You're a custodian. You're responsible.
Exactly. So, I really feel that the relationship between the CISO and their auditors should be a strong one. If it's not, find a different audit firm. Find one that works for you.
For people who haven't actually gone through an audit, is it typically the same person you're working with, or is it just a firm and you get whoever, does the audit? Can you build a relationship?
Yeah, you absolutely can. Typically, you'll have a project lead that will be there repeatedly. the entry level folks who are only there for a year or two to get their experience. Well, it's like almost like working at a SOC. They come in, they get their experience, they go somewhere else. But you absolutely can. I've been working with the same set of external auditors for like 6 years now. I've kind of had them follow me when I came over to Devo because I trust them.
That's cool. That's
Let me
awesome
ask
to
you
hear.
this, Kayla.
Yeah.
How do you prepare for those individuals to come in and check your homework, so to speak? Do you have things prepared when they come in? How do they do their due diligence to help you out?
A lot of them give us lists. They're like audit request lists, evidence request lists. And because we've done audits before, especially like a SOC 2, I think that's the most common one here that you'll find across the US.
It's a big one.
It's a big one here. You'll know what they're going to ask for. So what we like to do is every quarter do like a compliance week is what we call it. And we ask through JIRA tickets for people to submit their evidence. And we have like a whole board and we'll like have that evidence. So then we'll just submit it to the auditors. And then they have a list of people they want to interview. They'll look at the major controls and they'll say, I want to talk to this person about this process, and give as much as you can up front. You have to be open and honest with them, even though it might not be pretty when you lift that rug up. But it just helps you because then they can help you get budget. If you're like, hey, this is missing, and you go to the board or whoever and say, hey, our auditors gave us this report and we have a high finding. We need budget to address this, whether it's people or technology.
So you actually leverage the audits to earn appropriate technology. Is that what I heard?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. I strongly encourage security teams to do that because it helps to build brand trust and recognition in the marketplace. And, they always say like, it's not a matter of like, if you get breached, it's when there's an incident, right? So if you can do as much as you possibly can to protect your brand by having, alerting tools in place or a new firewall, a WAF, whatever, and that's going to help reduce the likelihood of something like that happening, it's worth it.
I really like your process because it's continuous and, it sounds like you're not necessarily getting any surprises, at least that, you're anticipating what's coming. You have a solid understanding of what the expectations are and, and how to prepare. So that really, really helps. And I'm sure is part of building that relationship, right? Because they trust you. You're going to have your evidence ready, prepared, and transparent. So that's how you build that relationship, I would imagine. Correct, Kayla?
Oh, 100%. Yes. It is a relationship, right? You're going to have good days and you're going to have bad days, just like anything else. And there's going to be times.
If you were consistently trying to be non-transparent,
you're setting yourself up for bad days.
Absolutely.
Those guys are just going to walk. You're not going to have a 6-year relationship. They're like, no, we're not doing this. It's like, you're trying to get over. That's not our business. See ya.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Now that's a great point of view for those of us who haven't actually worked hand in hand with auditors. But the flip side of that question, what about the vendor and auditor relationship, or how do you leverage vendors to help your audit process? What does that look like?
Yeah, we do a little bit of work with different vendors to make our audit experience easier by really using our customer success manager. So if I know that I have a tool that's a vulnerability scanner and my auditors aren't familiar with it, or if they're new and they don't know what they're doing, like I'll hit up my customer success manager and say, hey, how do I build this report that shows certain things certain ways? And it makes the information digestible for people. Not everyone's going to be an expert in every single domain, especially at the speed at which the landscape changes in security.
And the tools, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Like leverage those relationships. If there's something that you need, tell them and say, hey, can I add a feature request? Or, how do I do this? How to build those bridges? One of the things that
you're presenting, look, this is what I need. How do you kick it out for me if it's not clearly obvious? That's
exactly.
awesome.
Because if we're asking it, somebody else has to be wondering the same thing too.
These are unique requirements, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And sometimes people I'm a very outgoing person, as you can tell. Like I'll talk about anything.
After a 2-week trip to Asia.
I know. I'm like hoping this is like keeping me awake.
I just
love
picture you on the Devo private jet, though, so no big deal.
No, that's all really good. And being in your CISO role, I'm sure you are pinged, cold called constantly from all new vendor technology. You know, maybe not one of the more glamorous sides of the CISO, but you do need to learn about the new technology, right? So
Yes.
I guess my question here, going back to compliance and auditing, are you noticing any trends in the vendor space where they are directly aligning to regulations or CIS standards,
Mhm.
or is that more of still a feature request or something that doesn't matter to you?
Oh, it absolutely matters, and it should matter to everyone in the security industry, not just like at my level, because it impacts your jobs, like your job prospects down the road. It's going to dictate what products are out there, and the regulatory landscape changes just as much as the security landscape does.
Mm-hmm.
Especially think about privacy. I report into general counsel, which is becoming more of a trend across different verticals, industry verticals, because privacy regulations change so often. Every time there's a lawsuit, like Schrems, right? If you don't know what Schrems is, that was like the court case that was brought in Ireland against Facebook for privacy. Then there was Schrems 2, and there's no privacy shield right now, which is the regulations between the U.S. and the European Union that allow for data transfers. It's chaos. Look it up. I suggest, but because things change so quickly and laws and regs are up to interpretation by judges, having the security team report into the DPO or a data protection officer or general counsel makes a lot of sense, because your program should be able to pivot. And for me, how I've built my program is I have a security framework, which has one overarching security policy that's like the thou shalt management statements, which is acceptable use, things like that. But then I have in the security standard that's aligned to ISO that says, for this particular control, you must meet CIS level 2, CIS level 1. And then we link to those inside our Confluence pages so people can know exactly what they need to do. Because from where I sit and where my teams have worked in the past is we don't necessarily implement every control, nor do we own the risk, which I'm sure lots of people are smiling right now hearing that security doesn't own all security risk. The folks that are boots on ground doing that work in the different functions, whether it's network or infrastructure, operations, whatever it might be, need to have the resources handy. So
and be able to document it for you, right?
Absolutely. And I write my controls as controls. Like, this is what you must do, not how you do it. How you do it is up to each and every functional department, because the last thing they want is a security person coming in saying you're doing it wrong, because then it builds just this negative relationship. If you can tell me how your process actually mitigates the risk, I don't care how you do it. Just tell me. We'll tell the auditors and we're good.
Kayla, let me ask you this, and hopefully your boss is watching now or the replay. How is your, it's kind of different to report to a general counsel, doesn't scream huge technical knowledge, maybe privacy laws and, things like that. But, are you doing a lot of coaching, or how does that go? I'm sure you're learning a lot in both directions. So it's probably very interesting.
Yeah, it's definitely a bi-directional relationship in terms of learning from one another. I'm really lucky. My boss, his name is Ingo, he is great. He's been in the SaaS industry for a very long time, so he understands the technical
pretty
side.
techy. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, but it's great because you have the legal hammer, which you never want to use it until you have to use it. But you have to think about cyber insurance. The general counsel, the legal team is going to be responsible for that. And so it's finance. So they're going to want to make sure that what you say you're doing. So if there is something that happens, you are covered. Like I said, the privacy laws, technical privacy should really sit under GRC in terms of that collaboration with the business units and the legal opinion, because you can't really do anything without legal telling you what they think is the right thing to do, which is another, like a CYA process.
It sounds like overall it really protects you.
Yes.
And probably gives you quicker access to resources, since the risk is clearly identified by yourself and digested by someone that can make decisions on, investment and so forth. So that's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And the legal team looks at every single customer contract. So they know if you have a key customer who has a caveat to their contract that maybe nobody else knows, you could say, hey, this customer over
They'll
here.
flag that. Yep.
Exactly. And that helps to get things prioritized, which we always hear from product and engineering. If it's not, prioritized, we're not going to do it.
Yep.
And then that really helps to move things along as well.
Until there's a contract, then you do it.
Yeah.
Priorities shift all the time. No, that's a great introduction. I appreciate you going deep on some of those topics.
Yeah, of course.
I'm gonna circle back to one thing you said about your SOC analysts, and I'm gonna try to tie it back to today's topic. So, CIS benchmarks, proactive, preventative, security recommendations, and one thing you said earlier is there's a ton of alerts that need to be sifted through. The SOC analysts are looking at them constantly.
Yeah.
So we're talking about preventative hardening configuration recommendations through CIS. If every business had these implemented, what would you expect to happen to those alerts? Would those be going up? Would those be, less frequent, or would they have no impact?
Oh, there would absolutely be an impact. I would think that it's kind of twofold, right? So if you harden and you go to CIS level 2, because that's defense in depth, that is really where you are going to be seeing the biggest bang for your buck. It's not easy, but it is definitely, if you're a security company, you should be aiming for level 2, or in a regulated industry, like healthcare, finance, etc. You're going to see your alerts go up because you have more visibility. You are ingesting more logs. You are going to see those attackers that are knocking at the door who haven't necessarily gotten in, but are saying, I see you and I'm trying to get in. And then you can take, additional measures to further protect yourself. Maybe put some honeypots out and you try to see what they're going after. And then that level of transparency allows you to make better decisions. And that is so important.
Is it fair to say there'd be less maybe false positives with a hardened environment?
That depends, because any alerts that you get, you need to tune them.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really where you're going to see like the less of the decrease in the false positives. You have to look at those alerts and see what's actually really coming in. So almost kind of doing your own mini audit of
an ongoing
that
process. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And, going back to like Devo, what we do is we have AI built into our platform. So you can train through the large language models. You can train those, the AI to open and close cases to perform particular actions, because we have an integrated SIEM or SIM, however you want to pronounce it, and then a SOAR platform as well. So it's constantly learning from your data, what your teams are doing, how they're reacting, and that helps to reduce the noise as well, which helps reduce burnout.
Yeah, I was going to say
love that. That's the key. You can sell hardening to the board. Just tell them we will have less burnout. So
bots don't burn out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a perfect. And I'm going to segue into today's topic. So we are covering a variety of topics, like going from DNS, LAN-MAN workstation, link layer topology, quite a few topics. I don't want to go too in depth into the overview topics, just to be conscious of the time here. And let's talk about some of the MITRE attack techniques that could be mitigated by some of these settings we'll talk about here in a moment. But Kayla, do you mind just kicking off and maybe just call out a few of these and just talk towards them and what they are?
Yeah, I can absolutely do that. No problem. So, the DNS snooping and manipulation, that one there, that first icon over to the left, is using DNS over the HTTPS. It helps to ensure that DNS queries are encrypted, prevents eavesdropping or tampering with the DNS data, which helps to prevent the man-in-the-middle attacks that you hear so much about. Which always makes me laugh that that's still a thing. I feel like I really shouldn't be a thing anymore.
I think from your introduction, the audience already put together Devo's very mature talking about these L2s. So for the general audience, I can see how these are still very relevant.
Yeah, no, it's not even just that. Like I think because of the regulated industries I've been in and that we work with, and Devo does have a MITRE attack framework built in out of the box for these things. So So to me, that's a big one that is really important to try to cover. The net BIOS, so disabling net BIOS on public networks, it reduces the risk of attacks that exploit it. Name services like spoofing, relay attacks.
Yep.
There's the fonts. I think this one is so interesting because people
This one's
don't.
fun.
This one is so much fun because people don't think about it, do they? Like your fonts. If you were downloading free fonts, like please stop.
What's it mean if something is free, Kayla? How are they making their money?
Because they're breaking in and stealing your data and selling it, please. But you know what? That's funny because not funny. It's really not funny. But
It's real.
It's real. My daughter did that. She's 13, and she started downloading free font software because she wanted, the fun things that you see out there. And oh my gosh, I was like, please don't do that. I had to reset her whole phone. I wasn't going to take the risk. But then I thought, like, okay, she's 13. She doesn't really know any better. So then I started Googling it. So many people have been impacted by this because infiltrators can embed malware into the fonts. They can use invisible fonts in between the word spaces. So in that A there, like that little triangle on the top, they can put something in there that, can really exploit your data. It's a keylogger. It's awful. It's not an attack surface that people really ever think about, and myself included, until it happened to me. I didn't really think about
Similar
it.
to a zero-click exploit, really.
Yeah, exactly.
Obviously, you're signing up for it on purpose, but once it's there, it's having its own way.
Privacy concern if there's keyloggers in there because they're now going to infiltrate your system, and then are you going to a banking website? Probably from your phone, you are, and that information is now being exfiltrated.
Terrifying for a minor like your daughter or anyone in general. But worst case scenario is your description.
Yeah, absolutely. Thinking about it happening at organizations as well, I think is
I love that you highlighted the font one. That's very entertaining for me because these are all interesting, right? And these are, net BIOS, network access, network poisoning. Like that's more things we maybe talk about or really hear about. But we highlighted the font, which is awesome because these benchmarks are here because people don't configure it. By default, you can do this. If you don't take the however many seconds, minutes to disable this, it's available.
Yeah, but that starts to beg the question, and I believe it's been like Jen Easterly was talking about it quite often, especially now with Cybersecurity Awareness Month. It's like the secure by default and design. These things should not be on by default; they should be off, and you should have to make a conscious decision to turn some of these settings on because then you are actually deciding to expose yourself to risk.
Yeah, support ticket. Why do you need that?
Exactly.
You don't need sparkly fonts. Trust me.
Exactly.
All right. Well, I think network access, network response poisoning, I think we have a good understanding of that one, but could you just touch on the peer-to-peer exploits and the topology discovery at a high level before we go into the settings?
Sure. Yeah. I don't know how much in depth you really want me to go into this one, but it's considered really risky in certain contexts, not in all of them, due to various privacy and security concerns. It offers advantages like decentralized communication and sharing, but it also poses risk.
That's perfect.
I don't know if you can see, I have a risk manager shirt on because that is all I think about all day. But so it's lack of centralized control, malware distribution, right? It distributes pirated software, media, and other content being shared back and forth, file sharing, vulnerabilities not being patched. I think, very basic security, please patch your stuff.
Absolutely.
Please.
CIS highly recommends.
Yes.
Oh, that's perfect. And we're coming up right at the 30-minute mark. We have about 10 settings to cover. So I'm going to do my best to budget time, but we'll spend about 2, maximum 3 minutes per setting. Maybe we'll go a little bit quicker on some of them, longer on others, but look, it doesn't have to be too fast. We still want Kayla's stories, but we've talked about this, so I'll just kind of put at a high level, CIS is there as that preventative, proactive security measures. One question I'll pose to you on this slide to Kayla is, you mentioned having your SIM, SOAR, EDR solutions. Breaches are still happening today, and I would say the majority of enterprises at least have those. How are breaches still successful? And a bad question, but if they were hardened with an EDR, would breaches happen less? I guess is how I'd pose it.
Yeah, I would say, the likelihood is definitely going to trend in the right direction, which is down, right? But I think that the issue is back to something we talked about before, which is lack of transparency. So if you don't know that you have like legacy systems, you don't know what those access control mechanisms are there, you don't have logs coming in, there's no visibility, there's no patch management in place, that's going to increase the likelihood of something happening. And that's where, all the tools and bells and whistles are not going to help you. So I think it's CIS Control 1 is your inventory.
It is, you know it.
But we all fail at having the basics done, right? And that's really where, like, keep it simple, stupid, right? That's the KISS method. I say it often to myself because, like, I find things, or people, like, the great thing about the culture at Devo is, like, people will say, hey, I found something. They don't try to, like, sweep it under the rug for the most part, which is fantastic. And they'll come to me and they'll say, hey, I found something. It's like, okay, why isn't that in our inventory? It's like, oh, there's no scanner on it. There's no, we didn't even know it was there. The person who was managing it left, or right. Yeah. So that's going to happen across every organization. So get the basics right. And then that makes the rest easier.
And I love that, Kayla, I couldn't agree more. And, we just flip real fast back to level 1 controls. So we're going deep into level 2 today. But not everyone needs level 2. We're talking about finance and healthcare that are securing very private and personal information. But we always emphasize as well, like you, Kayla, simple. Make sure you get to IG1 with CIS controls, first. And obviously you can't get to level 2 before you finish IG1, implementation group 2. But yeah, just the basics. I say it all the time. We don't need more security. We need better basics. And so I really appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's important too that if your customers are in a regulated industry, start to think about what that level 2 looks like. Start to plan for it, because your customers expect a certain level of security. So even though you might not be, if you're a SaaS, you're not regulated really, unless you're GDPR or other privacy laws. So start to think about what commitments you've made inside your contracts with those customers in regulated spaces as well, and how you can address those risks.
You really need that forward look into regulations too, because as you pointed out, Kayla, they're really that landscape is changing as fast as security threats. And you also need to plan for that, because, those regs can hit hard if you're not prepared.
Absolutely.
I think that's one really key thing you said that I actually haven't heard. We hear cybersecurity landscape constantly changing, but we don't hear as much on the regulation side, or it's not as talked about. Definitely could be a topic of its own. We will have to jump into some of these settings, but no, these have been really great stories. So let's kick off with the first setting. Configure DNS over HTTPS or DOH, name resolution, and CIS is recommending to make sure you allow DOH. Could you just tell us what this is? And again, highly educational. So domain name server, like DNS, what is it? How does this work?
Yeah, absolutely. And, for me, I love this control because it's something that I didn't really know much about myself. As I said, I'm not deeply technical, but I had some brilliant people who have worked with me in the past who have done such a great job of explaining these things to me. And, when you type in Facebook.com, you're not going to Facebook.com. It is, your browser is looking for the right IP address, the DNS, and then, there's this breakdown that comes through where there could be a man-in-the-middle attack there. And again, something that you don't really think much about, but it's certainly something that is worth looking into, right? It's like the phone book. Right. It's the phone book of the internet. It's just kind of the old like black and whites where people like putting things in the holes for the phone.
Make sure it's all connected. Yep.
Yeah, exactly. So the DOH or DNS over HTTPS absolutely helps to enhance your privacy and security for your organization. So its main advantage is that it encrypts that traffic. The queries are not going to be sent. The traditional DNS queries are sent in plain text. So this obviously is encrypting them, and it helps to shield your traffic from potential malicious actors who are monitoring and analyzing your browsing habits. Also, like advertisers, like I think it's the CCPA, which is the California Consumer Protection Act. Like when you opt out of marketing, this is a great way to just have that setting in place overall. It helps you bypass censorship and filtering. So some ISPs in governments help lock down the internet in their regions, and it helps you bypass that, which censorship to me, that's like your freedom of speech and your right to certain information, especially in the political climate that we're in right now, is something that I think people should be paying attention to, right? What are you not allowed to see from an information perspective? And I think that's just super important to be able to bypass that. Public Wi-Fi networks are often less secure, so it's very attractive for certain attackers to come in. So if you're using the DOH on a public Wi-Fi network, it's going to help protect your queries there as well, and the interception is less likely.
That's perfect. And we had the comment DNS poisoning, and I know this can also help with eavesdropping. I mean, that was a spot on explanation and plenty of use case. And I don't think there's a time to ever really go against this recommendation from CIS. It seems a little shoot yourself in the foot.
Never a good idea. No.
Yeah.
That's perfect. Let's hop into this next setting here. Configure net BIOS settings. And we want to make sure this is, again, Josh Copeland gave us, who introduced us, by the way, Kayla, but gave me the best explanation. Is set to enabled, which means disabled net BIOS. So Josh gave me the best explanation, but the way these are phrased is how they are by default. And then if in a lot of cases like this one, there's going to be like double negatives or enabled means a negative. Anyway, Kayla, please.
Yes, it is. It's why not just be secure by default? But again, I have to think back to like Microsoft has been around for what feels like 50 years. Yeah. And it's just, security wasn't top of mind back then, right? So we'll
unfortunately it's still not entirely.
I know. We'll try to give it a slide. But again, NetBIOS, so network basic input output system, for those that aren't familiar with it, is another one that makes it susceptible to eavesdropping and packet capture. So if you're on a public network with potentially untrusted users or entities, that is a significant security risk. You really need to make sure that.
And this is allowing communication. Is that what this is?
Yes. Sorry about that. Yes. It helps.
You're good. You're technical, Kayla. I'm doing my best to pull you a little bit higher, but you're doing great.
Trying to keep it. I did my homework. I just want to make sure I was right.
Long plane ride.
No, that's really good. So absolutely agree with that. These public networks, you want to make sure your machine can only communicate with the appropriate network. So spot on there. Yeah. Anything else you want to add on that one? Sorry to cut you off mid-thought.
No, it's really important because there's file and print sharing vulnerability as well. So, just set it to enabled so that it disables it, please.
Yes, absolutely. All right, this next setting here, I think, is a fan favorite. Turn off multicast name resolution. I think many of us may understand this setting as LLMNR. I have a feeling we're going to talk a little bit about man in the middle here, but Kayla, explain to us what this setting is and maybe why it's more popular for people to know about it.
So this one, yes, it's a man in the middle, it's eavesdropping, it's spoofing, it's all the things that you learn about in your foundational security classes. It's unbelievable. So the multicast name resolution risks, it's one of those things that it introduces certain threats and vulnerabilities in local network environments. And it's so hard to kind of get it down into how, I don't even know how to really word it the right way without freaking anybody out about it, because there's so much, because you can have DNS cache poisoning when they attempt to poison your DNS cache by responding to multicast name resolution requests. So as you're going through and you're making your devices are making requests, it's going to input false or malicious DNS records that then return you to another page that's masquerading as a risk. So it's a communication risk back and forth between your assets.
That's perfect. And I guess to play a little devil's advocate, if you can talk at all more towards this, is there ever a time to, allow multicast name resolution? Is it for legacy equipment, or is there really not a good use case in today's technology?
Yeah, I haven't found a really good use case for it yet. I mean, if anybody could put a comment in on the side, and there is one, I'd be really interested to learn more about it from my perspective as being like a risk, risk management. Because maybe there's
like Marty's got us on the comments.
Yes, thank you, Marty. I see.
Yeah, thank you very much, Marty. Keep it going.
Yep. No, that's perfect. All right, let's get into our fan favorite setting here in this room. So, font providers. You already shared an incredible story here, but just to re-emphasize this, Kayla, why don't we want to allow just general users in our enterprise environment to have this, or maybe in most cases, personal users even to have this?
Yeah, this is one of those ones like that I said before, where fonts, when you download them and they're free, you don't know what's in them. Think about back like another encryption basic that I remember learning about was stenography, about like the risk of putting messages hidden inside different pictures. They're doing that with fonts now as well. It is really, a risk that you just don't think about often. And I actually did my homework on this one. You'll be really impressed with this one here, especially as it relates to Microsoft 365 users. The One Font campaign targeted Microsoft 365 users. The Zero Font, which manipulated font sizes to enact phishing campaigns hidden in text between letters, which weakened the recognition performance of anti-spam software. So people ended up clicking on malicious links and opening emails that had malicious fonts in them, clicking around.
When they were just clicking on executables right there. Is that what you were sharing?
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And then the Unitrix exploit infiltrated devices with viruses, info stealers, Trojans, and crypto miners. So that I didn't realize. So this is something like I saw that. I'm like, okay, obviously I've heard of it before. I've had the experiences, but I needed to do my homework on it. And I had no idea. So please block people from downloading these things. Don't allow it.
I love the transparency here. And you shared at the beginning how extroverted, how happy you are to talk and share. We all have areas to learn. Like, yes, intuitively, Kayla, Rich, myself, we know this is bad, but I don't think maybe Rich knew, but I didn't know those stories. That's a bit terrifying.
Yes, Gothic steampunk font is awesome. I do have to agree. It does look really good. I can't disagree. But
sometimes there's acceptable risk. You need
right. Just put it on the risk register. It's cool as long as it's transparent and someone knows. But that's think about Walt Disney, right? Their font is very locked down. Like you can't. There are companies out there that you can actually buy fonts from, apps and things. That's they're not expensive if you're doing it for yourself on your phone and you want like a pretty profile or whatever.
Adobe.
Yeah, look at the not just Adobe. No, there's other ones out there too. Like Monotype is a good one. I think I'm not 100% certain, but like when Twitter changed to X and they changed their font to that I think was owned. I think it was Monotype. I could be incorrect, but I think it was, and there was like a lawsuit because they never got permission to use it. So
oops.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'll put a cap on that slide and say this is an L1 setting. This is not even an L2 like the other settings that we're talking about here. So everyone should be
posting this as the font episode. Are you kidding me?
I love that. All right, let's hop into the next one here. So enable insecure guest logins. Again, this is Microsoft with a double negative.
That's such a misnomer, because if I read that and didn't know, I'd be like, why would I want to enable people to be insecurely logged in? So insecure guest logins can give unauthorized access to shared files or devices. Mm-hmm. I don't know why they don't just change the name of it. So disabling
Josh is the only one who knows.
Disabling restricts access to only authenticated users. So again, we all know, I think it's very, very simple. Like having unauthorized access. People can get in and move around. That you don't have to have valid user credentials, unauthorized access to sensitive data, applications, network resources. That is a huge privacy risk. GDPR fines are very expensive. So
I think that's my favorite thing. My favorite thing about doing these weekly episodes is because we do get into some of these more in-depth settings that aren't as intuitive, or you have to do some research before, right? But Windows by default has a lot of no-brainer settings that you should probably disable out of the gate, out of the box, or if we had it our way, probably came out of the box already disabled. But that's not the case, and there's a reason we have these weekly webinars to bring attention to these basic settings.
Yeah, and you know, if you don't have logging, the appropriate logging in place to see who's going around, what they're traversing, what they're accessing, you're opening yourself up to even more liability and a potential breach, which again, reputational risk, financial loss, customer mistrust. It is something that, you know, you really need to pay attention to and just make sure that it is turned off. Or enabled so that it is turned off.
And going, it looks like we have one more comment here. That one is guest account is disabled by default. Love that. So this next setting may not be as intuitively understood. So turn on mapper I-O LLTDIO driver. So I don't think the general audience is going to have a clue what this really means. I could use a refresher myself, Kayla. So introduce to us this one.
Really high level, it is for network discovery.
Okay.
But it can be exploited because it's secure. Everything can be exploited. But I think that people will know this more as mapping I/O. I think not just mapper, like mapping. I've heard it used that way before. So it's not inherently a security risk by itself, but instead it's a component of the Windows operating system that allows various IOs requests to be directed to the appropriate device drivers. It can be leveraged by malicious actors to carry out security attacks and privilege escalation. So that's why when you start to look at it, it is considered a potential security risk under certain situations. You know, when I hear privilege escalation, I get nervous about that because if you don't have your basics of access management down and your privileged accounts really logged and understood, things are going to happen that you're not prepared to address and you can't address necessarily.
You can't control.
Exactly.
And when you started your explanation on that, you said it allows communication on that IO. So there could be disruption if you do follow this and it's not set up correctly. Is that fair to say?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a continuity issue for sure. There's kernel mode execution that can take place, code execution. You can bypass other security controls. It's just not, this is one that you definitely want to pay attention to and make sure that your settings are correct.
Well, one of the first things, you know, if a bad guy unfortunately gains access, one of the first tools they're going to run is mapping the network, right? It's, you know, they're trying to figure out what's out there and what can they get to and, you know, how to get to it. And that is network mapping.
Right. And honestly, like how many companies have mapped their own networks themselves? How many of your architecture diagrams are current? And do you actually know where all your security gateways are? Probably not, but
is that part of your quarterly risk review?
Yes. So we're actually in the process of, we're almost done with our FedRAMP moderate authorization. We've gone through the, thank you. I just want to get there. And that was really the first time that I was held accountable for making sure that our teams had the right network diagrams with all the security gateways, mapping where the FIPS encryption was, not just in and out of our environment, our authorized boundary, but between our systems as well. And we wouldn't have done it to that level of depth until we were held accountable to doing it. And that was eye-opening for us to see.
Yeah, for sure. You know, and it happens, you find stuff that you didn't know it was there. That's why you have to keep doing the network map because, you know, someone put the Raspberry Pi device on for some unknown reason, or, you know, we got the bowling league forum, you know, whatever it is. So.
On the note of review and whatnot, Kayla, if going FedRAMP moderate, these hardened baselines, I'm sure you guys have it as standardized as best as possible across your entire enterprise. On the topic of review, do you guys make consistent changes to your baseline? Is this a one and done? How do you guys review it? Do you guys review it and maybe make sure they're actually applied in the right state? Is that something you guys can handle?
Yeah, we absolutely have to do it on a monthly basis as
Mhm.
part of the FedRAMP requirement.
Monthly.
Monthly, yeah, we have to do an inventory and baseline configuration, like audit, to make sure that everything is the
Proof
same.
for that. You can't do that manually.
No, and bless our team, like the engineering, the change management, because you have to be really careful with FedRAMP, the changes that you make. If they're material changes, you have to undergo another audit.
Sure.
So if there's something that doesn't quite line up and someone made an unauthorized change or what's perceived as an unauthorized change, then you're like, oh no, we got to deep dive. And that's where you start to do your own audits and reconciliations.
Wow. I think monthly is the most frequent we've heard on this series, Rich. That's
agreed.
Yeah.
Intense.
Yeah. And that's, I think, the same for FedRAMP low. So it goes low, moderate, and high for those designations. And, they go through the CIS controls, go up to STIGs, IL4, IL5, to different requirements there. But
so it's extremely challenging to reach compliance. But what you're saying, it may even be more difficult to maintain compliance.
Yes, you have to seriously have management buy-in, because it's a resource intensive, and we have automated as much as we can. We have, infrastructure as code, which has removed a lot of the manual nature of our security controls and processes, as well as through our CI/CD pipeline, our security gateways. We are grandfathered in with revision 4 for FedRAMP, but we have to move to revision 5 in a year from whenever we get authorized. And those have a lot of new privacy controls. So I'm looking into CI/CD pipeline tools that we can put in there that can help to automate those privacy reviews. Because it's not just about PII, it's changes that could impact the integrity of the data, the access to the data. And you have to have those gateways too. So it's just constantly changing. Got to be able to pivot.
Well, we appreciate you giving us an hour of your time, Kayla.
Yeah,
my head just started spinning.
that was a lot for me to take in, but it's good. So we have 2 more settings and we're right on time. So this is going really well. So this next setting here is turn on responder driver. Could you talk to us about this one? Again, another one that's not super intuitive.
Yeah, so this one is very similar to the last. It is aids in network discovery and mapping, but it can also be a potential vulnerability. So it is often referred to as the LLMNR, because who doesn't need more acronyms in this field? It's a mouthful, but it's a Windows network, in a Windows network environment, a component that serves a specific purpose in a local network name resolution. So its function is to resolve host names to IP addresses on local networks when DNS is not available, or when traditional DNS name resolution fails. I don't know if this actually is really in use that much. I wasn't overly familiar with this one. It's always, to me, it's like these things are so legacy and outdated. And sorry, I don't know if you can hear my dogs. I apologize.
It's all right.
Working from home. But yeah, so this is a bit legacy, and I would say rely on DNS.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I think it really changes. I mean, you're working in a FedRAMP moderate space. Sounds like you've worked at some very mature enterprises. A lot of the area where me and Rich focus our time is with managed service providers. And, some of these settings may be needed because of your small micro business clients do have legacy equipment that they refuse to upgrade. So again, just emphasis on this webinar series. It's good to be careful before just doing these recommendations.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, like local networks, small networks probably can't use DNS. DNS queries can delay and cause issues, right? So small local networks, home networks certainly would want to be using this control. So I think you're right. Like, make sure it's not one size fits all. You have to do a risk assessment.
That's right. Yep.
Absolutely. All right, one more setting, and then I got a few pre-populated questions, and if anyone wants to toss new ones into the live comments. But we got turn off Microsoft peer-to-peer networking services. So I think this is one of the MITRE attack techniques we talked about at the start, but explain to us why we may not want the peer-to-peer networking service available.
It exposes your devices to potential threats. It makes everything look, it's like turning on your iPhone and having like your settings so that people can connect to your
I was
Bluetooth.
thinking airdrop and all that, just accept all.
Oh yeah, that's such a bad idea.
Connect here with hotspot on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. So peer-to-peer networks expose users' IP addresses, and they allow other people to see what files are being shared. That man in the middle, this the sniffing around, seeing what's going on. It can really lead to privacy concerns and expose your private personal information. They're not always kept secure. There's vulnerabilities. Making sure that things are up to date is, again, patch management. It's a basic, but we often fail in making sure our devices are patched, and personal devices as well. Peer-to-peer applications hog bandwidth. So everything slows down. It consumes significant network bandwidth. So it
major zero-day exploit for Cisco devices that requires patching. So do your patching.
Yes,
that one was just out.
Yeah,
No.
Absolutely.
That's a really good overview on the settings. So I'm gonna lay you up a couple Q&A questions that I have. So being in the mature enterprise space that you are, Kayla, is there any recommendations you can share around securing network communications in a modern enterprise? And to expand on that a little bit more, I'm curious how you guys developed your baseline. I imagine you didn't just hit apply all CIS recommendations and lock everything down. Could you walk us through maybe that process and what it took?
So you're not going to be able to see it because the font, it's going to be really, really small for you. But I actually have a printout of the CIS version 8, right?
Not downloaded font, is it, Kayla?
I don't know. I downloaded it from your webpage. So if it's a font issue, that's on your side.
Safe. You're good to go.
CIS supply chain.
Every vendor says they're secure.
Trust but verify.
Exactly, yes. But I would certainly recommend downloading this and putting it into an Excel format. I think we actually just downloaded it into the Excel format and going through and ticking off the controls that you already have in place. And then understanding the ones that you don't will take sitting down with your stakeholders. And it's really performing a gap assessment or a risk assessment of your controls, because what you don't know is going to be what hurts you. So doing that, taking notes, working cross-functionally, which I know we don't always like working with other functions because they don't always understand what we're saying, but it is our obligation as security professionals to speak the business language.
Mm-hmm. What you don't know, the auditors will find.
Oh, don't I know it?
Right?
I mean,
absolutely.
Being on both sides, you found it, and now you need to be responsible for it.
Yeah. So, it's really like taking the control set, like I said, looking at what you have and then what you don't have, going to your teams and finding out what the level of effort it would take to turn them on, or justifying why they're not. And then if you are a security professional, you can do your own research, which we all do, right? Google is like our best friend, and see the likelihood. Okay, this has happened. There's been an incident with this particular control that was missing or wasn't as strong as it should be, X number of times. So the likelihood of it happening in my industry, in my use case, is rare or almost certain. And then that's going to help you to identify what your priority should be and what that risk exposure is for your company. And then being able to say, hey, if we're popped because of this and it impacts our largest customer, that could be X number of dollars that we could potentially lose at that risk of, leaving us. Oh, but this tool that fixes it, or hiring a 1 FTE to do this, it's a fraction of the cost. There's your justification right there. So
you mentioned one thing I want to expand on or ask a deeper question, which we only have a couple minutes left, but you mentioned looking at other industries. Like, we all see the vulnerabilities, we know what the risks are, we can see the new ones, but it sounded like it amplifies the priority if it happens to another enterprise in the same industry as you. Is that how CISOs look at it?
Oh, yes, that is certainly how I look at it, because if they're susceptible, then we're likely susceptible too, because even though we're all different products, we all tend to have the same back end in some way, shape, or form. And, it's
you don't usually hear that admitted on a live episode.
No, but think about it, right? Like
common element.
It
Maybe different implements, the elements are common. Different.
Yeah, look at Log4j, right? Like, how many companies use Log4j there are so many different aspects to your products that didn't know they
How
had the
many
library in
companies
there.
haven't patched because they don't know where it exists in their
Right.
organization?
Because they failed at the basics. And,
Yeah.
you know, that's a common industry trend. So, you know, my advice would be like, before you dive into defense in depth, if it seems like it's way over your head, is check on your basics. Ask for the inventory. If you don't have a GRC team, which not all companies do, you know, maybe add in a request for a security risk professional or a technology risk, but however you want to call it, to get the buy-in and have them do assessments internally. It's going to save you in the long run.
I love that. No, that is awesome. And Kayla, I appreciate you being on the episode. Thank you for giving us the hour. I give this opportunity to every guest to just have any concluding thoughts. So if there is anything you want to leave us with, I think for me, the big takeaway of what you shared at the beginning and the end is cross-department and trust. So that was really cool to hear. But any closing thoughts from you?
Yeah, I would say as security professionals, we have a fiduciary responsibility to the organizations that we work for and our employees and stakeholders and shareholders across the company. And, you know, we can't do it all, but it's okay to say we can't do it all and to document what's missing, especially compared to, you know, the CIS controls. It's a very, very easy outlined mechanism to understand your threat landscape. Identify those gaps, make a recommendation, and include it as part of your budget. And that's going to help to reduce your threat landscape, the likelihood of something happening. And it also helps to enable that cross-functional collaboration as well, because you have to talk to other people outside security.
It'll help you pass an audit.
Yes.
I love it. Well, very awesome, guys. Thank you for joining today's episode. As always, we are here weekly. We do aim to do this every Wednesday at 1 p.m. Sometimes we have curveballs. But next week's guest is Felicia King, and we're going to talk about some of these even more legacy configurations. So I know we're going to be really hammering MITRE techniques during that episode. And we got CompTIA Chris Johnson coming up. And for some reason, it's very hard to find a guest to talk about printers. I thought printers were the hot topic. Everyone loves configuring their printer communications.
They're a great attack point.
I got 3 weeks to find one. But we also have a newsletter where we dive a little bit deeper into these slides in a written format, so you can kind of digest it that way. And then, as always, Kayla did share she is happy to connect. So if you can drop your LinkedIn or email into the comments, we'd appreciate it. Rich and I are also happy to connect. And if you did want to test out Senteon to the CIS benchmarks, you can always scan the QR code and give that a whirl, see where you sit today. But thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. And thank you for being our guest, Kayla.
Yeah, thank you.